وقت بخیر، بیننده حرف آخر هستید. یکی از کشورهایی که سالهاست هشدار میده جمهوری اسلامی تهدیدی علیه مردم خودش و امنیت منطقه و جهان اسرائیل. این هفته من در اسرائیل هستم و مهمان من شخصیه که شاید این روزها یکی از تأثیرگذارترین آدم‌های روی کره زمین باشه درباره آینده جمهوری اسلامی. در دقایق آینده شاهد گفتگوی من خواهید بود به صورت اختصاصی با بنیامین نتانیاهو، نخست وزیر اسرائیل. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for accepting my interview request. This is the first time you are talking to Iranian people directly since the beginning of a movement we call Women, Life, Freedom Revolution. How do you see today's Iran in terms of its people, this new generation of Iranians coming out in the streets and want this regime gone?
Well, I think now, as a result of this incredibly courageous protest by women, men, youngsters, children who are claiming their right to be free, the entire world recognizes that the Islamic Republic regime is the enemy of the Iranian people, the enemy certainly of Israel, but the enemy of free peoples everywhere. And I think this is a miraculous achievement. It shows the strength of the human spirit that refuses to bow down before this tyranny and this oppression. And I can only say that it arouses enormous admiration, my personal admiration, but I think the admiration of the entire world.
How do you see the regime's response to this movement? We have been observing, unfortunately, killings, arresting people, torturing, cases of rapes in prison. Executions.
Endless executions.
Yeah. How do you see the regime's response to this movement?
Well, I think the regime is terrified because they know that they've been the enemy of the Iranian people for so long. But now the entire world knows that. It's unmasked the true nature of this regime for all the world to see. They were trying to hide their true character. They had charm offensives. They had their diplomats talking about human rights, talking about Iran's unaggressive nature, its quest for peace. Now everybody understands. Not only do this regime, which is the greatest fomenter of terrorism in the world, with the IRGC, the greatest terrorist organization in the world, now the entire world understands this. And I think this is a great change. And it's to the credit of the brave people of Iran that they've unmasked this regime that has taken over a gifted, able, creative people, the people of Iran, heirs to a great civilization. And I believe the people who will make a great civilization again once they're released. But they've been overtaken by these thugs, this radical Islamist thugs who have now been unmasked. I think the most important thing is now that everybody knows what the people of Iran have known for a long time, that this regime doesn't care for the Iranian people. This regime, when sanctions were lifted, took billions and billions of dollars, but didn't contribute anything to the well-being of the people of Iran, but only to maintain their tyranny and to export their tyranny. This is a great change, and it is to the credit of Masakh Amini and to all the others who have gone to the streets, risked their lives, given their lives for the noble cause of freedom.
Yeah, and they are the heroes of Iranian people, and I'm sure the whole world. Let's get to the main part of this interview, Prime Minister. Iranians are clearly calling on international community, specifically Western leaders, Europeans, not to negotiate with a regime that kills and tortures.
Its own people.
Its own people, exactly. I'm not talking about international concerns such as nuclear program, which we will get to this part in this interview. I'm talking about basic global shared values that there are enough reasons the world should not talk to this regime in terms of diplomacy or anything else. When you meet with them, with the Western leaders, world leaders, what do you tell them about this?
Well, I tell them that there is a moral imperative, but also a security imperative. And I do touch upon the nuclear question because for such a regime to have nuclear weapons, when it's committed openly to the destruction not merely of my own country, but to the subjugation of the world. They chant death to Israel, death to America, death to everyone in between who doesn't share their values. Muslims who refuse to accept their tyrannical creed, they want to kill everyone. They do kill everyone. They threaten to kill leaders in the West. They threaten to kill and do kill journalists, dissenters, people who voice their free opinion. They want to, if they could, they will terrorize the entire world. They are the primary force of terror in the world. But imagine if they have the weapons of the greatest terror, the weapons of nuclear weapons with which they could hold the entire world hostage. So I say to Western leaders, to world leaders, I say, history will change if Iran will get nuclear weapons. And the imperative now is to free the Iranian people, both for their own sake, but also for our common security. We cannot let this radical Islamic terrorist regime that oppresses its people, terrorizes everyone else, to have the weapons of mass death. This will change history, and we have to stop it before it happens.
Yeah, and what about those global values we've been actually observing in the last 6 months in Iran, which is being oppressed by the Iranian regime? For example, you met with the French president a few weeks ago in Paris, and I'm sure you're going to have a trip to Europe again soon. What do you say to them about these values that they should respect, at least if they're not worried about something like nuclear weapon?
Well, you know, we are free societies, and we value freedom above everything else. I think it's time to say to the Iranian regime, I would say, paraphrasing what our great prophet Moses said to the pharaohs of Egypt thousands of years ago. He said, "Let my people go." And I say to Western leaders, let us stand together before the Iranian regime and tell them, let your people go. Let your people be free. Let your people be free of your radical tyranny. And I think that's what I hear from the streets too. Because I think the big change that we hear is protests that say, down with the radical Islamic regime. Down
they want
with
the whole
tyranny.
regime gone.
They say it openly, and they're right. And this is something that I think is ultimately tied to the threat that we face. When such a tyranny gets weapons that could threaten the entire world, that is something that will threaten the entire world, threaten our freedom, threaten our values, threaten our security. So I think we're in, we have a common enemy. The people of Iran, the people of Israel, free peoples everywhere have a common enemy. And that common enemy is the Islamic regime that torments, subjugates, and murders its own people.
You've been saying this for years. You are one of the few leaders that has noticed this issue probably since the beginning of Islamic Republic. But now actually we see the international mood has changed since last few months with what they've been observing from Iranian people and also Iranian outside Iran protesting in different cities. What is their response when you talk to them about this? I mean, the world leaders.
It's changed. I think there was a tendency before to acquiesce to this tyranny, or to at least pretend that it's not as dangerous and as horrific as it is. That has changed, and I'm happy to say it's changed across the board. But first comes the recognition of a problem, then comes the action to solve the problem. And what we need to do is to combine our efforts to act against this murderous clique that has hijacked Iran from its people. That requires a combination of crippling sanctions against, for example, the IRGC. This is a fomenter of terrorism and tyranny unlike any other on earth. Well, let's apply crippling sanctions. And secondly, let's have a credible military response and a military threat against the potential development of nuclear weapons by this thuggery. I think you have to understand that until recently, people didn't understand this. They treated Iran as the Iranian regime as a legitimate government of the people of Iran.
Exactly.
And now they're illegitimate. People now understand this. When I speak to Western leaders, they understand this. And I have to say, it's not only the leaders who understand it. Across a very broad political spectrum right now in the West, Iran is seen for what it is. But seeing what Iran is the prerequisite and the prelude to acting against what Iran could be. and what it continues to be. And I think that action is required.
Yeah. A clear example, which I know is your concern too, and you mentioned in this interview, designating IRGC as a terrorist organization by European Union and also the British government. Do you agree they need to designate IRGC as a terrorist organization?
I think it's self-designating. I mean, all you have to do is, you don't even need special intelligence, of which I have a lot, but you don't need it. You can see it. It's evident to everyone. The IRGC is the foremost terrorist organization in the world. Yeah. It exports terrorism. They don't even hide the fact that they're out to kill American officials, elected officials. They're out to kill journalists who speak their mind anywhere, in London or in New York or any other part of the world. And of course, you don't have to hide the fact of what is being done in the name of these horrors inside Iran itself. I mean, all these things are part and parcel of the same Iranian system. Is the IRGC terrorist organization? What is it? If this is not terrorism, I don't know what terrorism is.
So is this in your agenda when meeting with the Western leaders?
Yes, I speak to them about that, but I go well beyond that, I can assure you.
Of course. The Iran nuclear deal, Mr. Prime Minister, you mentioned as well. How do you see the regime's nuclear program now? We had the IAEA reports, which a copy of that has been seen by the Associated Press, confirming experts found 83.7% enriched uranium in Iranian facilities. In your opinion, in what stage the Islamic regime is at in terms of its nuclear program?
Well, it's moving forward dangerously into a dangerous zone. It's true that our actions, among other things, have delayed them by at least a decade, but it doesn't mean that it stopped them. So they thought they would be 10 years ago where they are today, but they're still moving it. And this has to be stopped. We should tell them that they should, if they cross over the threshold of becoming essentially a nuclear power, if you will, on the threshold of becoming a nuclear power, that is something that we cannot tolerate. And I think that we have to have a common message. I'm trying to expand that message as far as I can, as best as I can. But I think that it's not merely our security and the security of the world that is involved. It's also the hopes of the Iranian people. See, once they have nuclear weapons, they will feel that they are invulnerable. They'll feel that they're there forever. And one of the things they want through the acquisition of nuclear weapons is not merely to terrorize the entire world and destroy good chunks of it. It's also to be able to be free from the threat of being deposed themselves. They think they'll buy immunity. So if you're for freedom for the Iranian people, if you're for the security of the world, if you're for the stopping of this terror campaign that knows no boundaries, then you have to be against Iran becoming a threshold nuclear state, let alone a nuclear power. That is bad news for the world, bad news for Iran, horrible news for all of us.
Did they cross that red line?
They didn't cross it for 7 years, but they crossed it recently, perhaps thinking that because the government in Israel changed, they had greater latitude, and they crossed it even further. But we have to tell them there's a line you can't cross, and there'll be a price to be paid if you do.
Prime Minister, you said in this new term of your premiership, Iran is in the center of your foreign policy. What does that mean exactly?
It's not in the center of my foreign policy. It is the quintessential heart of my foreign policy. I came back into government principally in order to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear state, to do everything in my power, as I've been doing in my years in this office, to prevent them from becoming a nuclear power, but also to achieve something that is parallel with it. We also opened the path for peace. We struck a deal with 4 Arab countries, some of them very close to Iran, the UAE, Bahrain, also Morocco and Sudan. And I believe we can expand this circle of peace to perhaps even give it a quantum leap.
Prime Minister, considering the domestic challenges these days you are facing from your opposition, can you focus on this policy?
I never lose focus on the danger from the Islamic regime, never. Because I know that we'll solve our problems in Israel. We have a way of doing that. But if Iran gets nuclear weapons, this will be a problem that all of us will face, and it will change the world. It would also cause the crisscrossing of the Middle East with nuclear tripwires as other regimes who understand the danger of a nuclear Iran will rush to arm themselves. So those who say, oh, well, if we take action against Iran, we will face a war. You'll face a war if you don't. You'll face a war and potentially a horrible nuclear war if you don't.
You said, this is your quote, the only thing that can really prevent Islamic Republic from obtaining a nuclear weapon is a credible military plan and action. You said it in a conference a few weeks ago. What does that mean exactly? A clear military plan and action.
It's exactly what it means. I don't think it needs elaboration. I think it's self-understood.
In another comment you said, in response to IAEA chief's comment, you said nothing will prevent you from protecting your country. Are we close to a military conflict with the Islamic Republic?
Well, it depends on Iran, of course, but I think that on the regime in Tehran, when I say Iran, I never mean the people of Iran, because I draw a firm distinction between these dictators. But I think Mr. Grossi, who's otherwise a reputable man, I think he said something totally wrong and inappropriate. He said that attacking Iran's nuclear facilities is illegitimate. There's nothing more legitimate than preventing a regime that openly calls for your destruction from having the weapons to achieve that goal. I mean, that's absurd. It's preposterous. And I hope it doesn't reflect what he really thinks. But whether or not it does, we will maintain, as I said, our right to defend ourselves, and in so doing, defend many others, including the people of Iran.
Prime Minister, I know you're a busy man. I have some personal questions. We are very close to Nowruz, the Persian New Year. How do you see Persian culture, considering the roots between the Jews and the ancient Iran?
Well, I view this as part of a common history and shared values. Of course, we had a man that we never forget, and that is Cyrus the Great, who entered our Bible. When we speak of Cyrus, we speak of a great leader of a great civilization, and we remember him for enabling the rebuilding of our Holy Temple in Jerusalem, for the return of the exiles from Babylon. All this is firmly embedded in our historical memory and in our consciousness. And I think today we face the same choice. Do we face down the tyranny? Do we embrace the inherent friendship between the people of Iran and the people of Israel, between Iranian culture and Jewish culture? And I think in many ways that's the greatest choice that we face and the greatest challenge that we face. But I want to take this opportunity to wish a Nowruz Mubarak to the people of Iran, not to lose hope, not to lose faith. You've shown remarkable courage, both inside Iran and outside Iran, because I know that there are brave people out there, including the people behind Iran International. And Iran International has gone international, has become a force to spread the truth and to spread the hope of freedom. And I encourage you to continue that, both inside Iran and outside Iran.
Do you have any Iranian friends?
Yes, many.
So you're familiar with Nowruz. Prime Minister, what is your favorite Persian dish?
Saffron
Speaking
rice.
of Nowruz.
Saffron rice. I'm a glutton for saffron rice, and I try not to overindulge.
You talked about Iran before the revolution. What do you remember? I know you were not that involved in Israeli politics at that time, but what do you personally remember from Iran and Israel relations between two nations, before the Islamic Revolution in 1979?
Well, you'd be surprised to know that I was going to go to Iran shortly before the revolution.
What year?
This is, I think it was late 78, beginning of 79, I think. And I was going to go there on some business, actually. I was working in the private sector at the time. And
what do you remember from that?
What I remember that I decided not to go because I thought that things might unravel there. And unfortunately, they did. And I think they did because there was a lack of understanding in the West, and especially in the United States, but also in some of the European countries who didn't understand that by encouraging Khomeini, allowing Khomeini to return to Iran. They were not liberating Iran, they were enslaving Iran. And I think that right now we're in a stitch of historical time where people now understand that. Because, again, of the courage of the people of Iran, but also because Iran is also supplying killer drones to murder innocent people in the heart of Europe. Many people understand today the nature of this regime, and they are, and that's important. It's an important development, but the jury is still out. The jury is still out on all of us. Do we fight tyranny? Do we protect freedom?
Yeah, that's what Shah was trying to warn the world, and at that time, no one actually listened to that. Do you see two nations unite soon again? I mean, Iran and Israel.
Yes, I think, yes, if this regime no longer will rule Iran, if there will be a freedom movement that succeeds, I think that the friendship between Israel and Iran will surpass anything that we can imagine. We were great friends before the Islamist takeover of Iran.
Yeah, of course.
Israel had built projects in Iran. I offered recently, when there was a terrible drought in Iran, to send Israeli technology, even now, with the present regime, refused. I offered to help in earthquakes, because we help, as we help now in Turkey and dozens of places around the world, refused. Because this regime doesn't care about the people of Iran. It cares about its own survival and its mad ideological plans to
expand the revolution,
to export the revolution, to dominate the world. The people of Iran are heirs to a great civilization, an incredible civilization. But today they have the power to become part of a great civilization because they have talented scientists, writers, artists, educators, business people. They have tremendous capacities, and I believe that once this regime, once they're freed from the murderous grip of this regime, you will see a flowering of Iran that is unbelievable. Now understand, I've been here as Prime Minister this is my 16th year, and maybe 25 years in government, and even more. During that time, we effected an economic revolution, a free market revolution that unleashed the genius that is inherent in our people. That genius is inherent also in the people of Iran. But look at what happened to us. We went from $17,000 per capita income when we opened up our markets and our enterprise to, according to the IMF, about $54,000 per capita income. Iran, during that time, stayed flat. Israel, with less than 10 million people, has a GDP that is equivalent to Iran with almost 10 times the population. So Iran went nowhere. During this time, this regime, the Islamic regime, took all the money that it received by a woefully mistaken policy of the West to try to accommodate this regime. They took it and they didn't invest it in the people of Iran. They didn't invest it in water projects or in agriculture or in health or in earthquake protection or anything else. They just took it and squandered it both on corruption and also on weapons and aggression and terror, and trying to build their nuclear stockpile. So the people of Iran have paid heavily for this. And once that regime is removed, you will see a flowering of Iranian civilization, of economy, of culture, and you will see cooperation between Israel and Iran that people cannot imagine. On the other hand, people didn't imagine that we'd have such a cooperation with billions and billions of dollars of mutual investment between Israel and Iran's neighbor, the UAE. But look at what is happening there. And I predict that the same thing, and even more, will happen between the people of Israel and the people of Iran.
Prime Minister, I'm sure you've heard this quote many times. Regime officials in Iran say your country will not see the next 25 years. This is your camera. What is your message to them through this lens?
Oh, we'll be here long after you're gone.
And my last question, what is your message to the Iranian people watching you tonight? I'm sure millions of people are watching this interview, fighting for a free Iran and fighting for overthrowing this regime, asking you not to do it for them, but stand by them.
We stand with you. I stand with you. But now, most of the world stands with you. You should know that. Don't lose heart. Be strong.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.